Okay, yeah, so I think we'll get started because this is also a hybrid event and we have people who are listening in online. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's session. My name is Claudia Ringler and I'm the Director of Natural Resources and Resilience at the International Food Policy Research Institute, and I'm also the co-lead of the sg-afnr initiative on Nexus gains. Climate change, as we all know, is creating multiple challenges: extreme weather events, changing Earth systems, biodiversity loss, and growing food insecurity. Many investments focused solely on water or solely on energy, solely on food or solely on ecosystems fail to account for the trade-offs across those systems and miss opportunities for synergies. The sg-afnr research initiative on Nexus gains has pioneered a systems approach that breaks down disciplinary and institutional silos to find ways to reduce trade-offs and identify synergies in water, energy, food, and ecosystem investments. We work with partners to develop and test Nexus models and other tools in 5 sub-regions of Asia and Africa. We identify opportunities to strengthen governance around those systems and to create capacities to plan and implement WAFE integrated solutions. The initiative is now 2 years old, and just last year we generated 140 exciting outputs and innovations, including 80 new knowledge products, and we, I think, are really on the way to achieve some lasting impacts in Asia and Africa. This particular session today will do a deep dive focusing on South Asia. Again, we know the topic of this conference is food security and with a strong linkage on climate change. And so we specifically focus on how can we transform our food systems in a climate crisis using water, energy, food environment, Nexus interventions. Before we introduce the program in more depth, we will hear from ADB's sister program, which is called the Climate Food Nature Nexus. Then we'll hear a bit more about the sg-afnr program, and finally we have 2 esteemed panelists who will give us their own perspectives. And without further ado, I would like to now invite Yasmin Siddiqui, who is the Director, Agriculture, Food, Nature and Rural Development of Central and West Asia and South Asia, to give us an introduction of the ADB programs in this area. So Yasmin, please come to the floor. And please a hand for Yasmin.
So very good morning to you all, and I trust everyone is still enthusiastic and excited about this event, which I believe so. Claudia, thank you for the introduction, and maybe just from my side, perhaps covering Central, West and South Asia, I'm often challenged to think where is the best place I can start. Each region, comprising so many countries, has its own peculiarities and challenges. In this case, what I really was keen to showcase is some of the work that we are pioneering in Central West Asia region. Now, these are the 10 countries which start from Pakistan and go all the way into the Caucasus region as far as Georgia. In my opinion, there's a lot of pioneering efforts that have been made there. And if we can go to my first slide, I just wanted to start off with So I wanted to start off with a story, which I have been trying to reiterate in many of the places where I'm presenting, but it's about wearing our climate lens. We've historically, for many of us who are in this area of work for many years now, have had many iterations of different approaches and different ideas on how do we integrate and deliver complex, complex address complex problems with integrated solutions. And there are tremendous layering of different approaches, including the ideas around integrated water resources management, the water energy nexus approach. I wanted to bring it into and in line with where ADB is and where ADB is heading, which is its climate ambition and a climate resilient Asia and Pacific. The reason I repeat it everywhere I go is because for me, and I just said it in the last session, we're on this train together. And if we don't hold hands and sit together on this train, some of us will fall off. So the train is hurtling along. We need to stay on it. And so I consider looking at these issues through the climate lens as one of perhaps the most important aspects. It also, again, working with different practitioners, whether you're coming from environment, water, economics backgrounds, at least for me, the climate lens is a level playing field. It's a convergence point. And using a risk-based approach is, in my opinion, one of the safe ways that we can all speak the same language and look in the same direction. So we have a story, and one of the key players of this story is in the room, fortunately with us, and that's Charles Rogers, who Charles will remember, it must be about 10 years ago, we were talking about climate change, and Charles is one of the leading experts we have in this area. And we kept on talking about how do we do projects which address climate change but don't do it from a silo? How do we do it in a comprehensive way? And at that time, and I'm talking about maybe 2012, 13, we were saying, but what do they look like? And we couldn't really imagine what they look like. How do we do projects which are premised on climate change, and what do they look like? And how would we identify the key interventions, and what would be the storyline that we would have in our dialogue with government? So finding that perfect situation was for us an important way of really trying to address the issues. And we found a high-risk basin where we have the buy-in from the client and also the expertise to start looking at this issue. So now I'm going to jump from South Asia, cheating here, to go to Central Asia. So please bear with me as I cheat. So for many of you who may not know Central Asia, this is Uzbekistan. It sits in the center, it's landlocked. It generates very little water resources of its own within the country and has a tremendously high vulnerability to climate change, which would induce, of course, instability in agricultural production and food security. As you can see there, landlocked, major river system running through it, the Amu Darya river basin. And that generates about 67% of the annual flows in Uzbekistan. So it's heavily reliant on the Amu Darya river basin. And there's, of course, the Sir Darya, which runs towards the north, but we're going to talk about Amu Darya. Over the last 15 years, the water availability has been decreasing, and water scarcity is projected to increase. The country, as many of you may know, has a history deeply steeped in cotton production and wheat production, particularly during the Soviet period, where cotton production, highly water-intensive crop, was really, Uzbekistan was critical for the whole Soviet Union in that context. There are upstream, downstream disparities. The Amu Darya starts upstream with the Vaksh River and the Pyanj River in Tajikistan, and upstream of that, the Panjamu in Afghanistan. In each of these upstream river systems, which are in highland areas, the tremendous development of hydropower, and many of you may have heard of the Rogun Dam on the Vaksh River and the Nurek Dam on the Vaksh River. And now with Afghanistan building its Kushtepa Dam, Kushtepa Canal, there's a lot of diversion that's happening upstream as all countries start hurtling into water scarcity and facing the impacts of climate variability, that tendency to go for increasing storage. For me, I was just saying this morning, I have never had so many requests for dam projects as I am seeing today from our client countries, and this is a sign of what's happening in this region. Power generation, of course, is critically vital, and it's that trade-off between those upstream countries of Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, wanting to store water for hydropower generation, and at the same time, those downstream countries requiring irrigation water for their crop production. So these disparities or these complexities really challenge this region. We worked with the government of Uzbekistan, specifically the Ministry of Water Resources, and I remember it must have been 2020, and we went to meet the Minister of Water Resources, a rather fierce gentleman, but a very smart gentleman. And we said to him, please don't bring us a project and put it on the table and say ADB financed this, which is the way it's often the case. We're given a feasibility study, ADB, please, this is the project we want to do. It's an irrigation system, 20,000 hectares. We need you to finance canal lining. And Minister, please, don't do that. So, Minister, please, can you please work with us on a risk-based approach? So, Claudia, I think that was it, 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute? How about 3? 3, okay. So, what we did was we shared with him, could we do an upstream climate risk assessment to look at how do we identify from the top down and the bottom up a set of solutions which could help you build an integrated approach to your investment planning in the long term. So it's neither water, it's neither agriculture, but it's giving you a suite of solutions. And what we did was looked at downscaling our global climate models to the Amu Darya River Basin and coming up with the top-down approach, which is, of course, addressing the risks and the vulnerabilities, and then working on identifying those key hotspots. So we looked at the hotspots from a range of contexts in terms of future droughts, future floods, heat stress, and as you can see on these plots here, each one of them identifies a different risk and the extent of that risk. Importantly, it's the Ministry of Water Resources that led the discussions and led the consultations with other ministries, and our team worked closely with them to guide them through this process. Secondly, our team worked closely in the river basin itself with key stakeholders, and here's just some illustrations of what we found in some of the districts in terms of the highest stressed districts. And so the ones in the dark brown are where we found that we had the biggest impact. So we did in-depth socioeconomic surveys to look at what were the context of the communities, focused group discussions with experts, communities, and of course the government representatives at the district level. We then came up with a set of national level stakeholder discussions to identify which were the solutions that they would like us to proceed with. So here are some of the, sorry about this, it's multiple clicks. These are some of the sets of solutions we came up with in those high-risk basins. Now, this has been an important dialogue for us with the government, and if I just take one of them, the one we're going to start off with, in Kitab district in Kashkadaria province. So here we see that flood management is an important area to address. The basin is very flood prone, also conservation agriculture, and then looking at environmentally based or nature-based solutions as well to look at degraded watersheds. So this has helped us now work with the government on a programmatic approach for Kitab district for a long-term investment planning using policy instruments for water management and irrigation, but also bringing in storage and also looking at watershed management. So I'm going to skip to the last slide because I've probably gone over my time as well here. Our next steps, importantly, are to consult with the government counterparts on really shaping up the scope of the investment, and our team will be going out next month to have that discussion. We're going out next week to discuss with the ministries and to package that investment. Importantly, what we're aiming for is having a policy-based lending combined with sector investments. So the policy instruments as the stick and of course the investment as the carrot, and using this combined approach to drive the investment planning and future interventions. This integrated approach really provides us with an opportunity to tackle disaster risk management, community resilience, modernized irrigation, watershed management, and storage rather than just looking at let's build a dam, or let's upgrade an irrigation system, let's rehabilitate a canal. So those terminologies are ones that we need to move away from and come in with these much more climate-centric and responsive approaches. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, no, this will give us also more time for the Q&A, and you can ask Yasmin, any difficult questions about dams and the water, energy, food nexus. So yeah, we are now going to the second presentation. We now have 2 more in-depth presentations about the CGR initiative on Nexus gains. And while Yasmin's straight from South to Central Asia, this is still perfect because it's one of our main regions where we are also working in. We just decided today to focus a bit more on South Asia, but it's so you get a much broader, set of pieces of information, and the challenges are really basically the same as Yasmin said. We are, facing, severe water scarcity. Okay, this thing is very fickle. We face severe water scarcity in all of Asia and obviously everywhere in the world. There is no country, no region that is immune. And yeah, and we have exactly the same questions, the same policies that all of the countries are trying to undertake. They want to price water for irrigation, they want more dams, they want to somehow control water for food, but at the same time they want more food. And so there's definitely no easy solutions here. And so that's why we all have to work together across sectors, and that's again what the CGR initiative on Nexus Gains is trying to accomplish. So I'll first, just throw up a few more slides of why we have to work across sectors and why interventions outside food are essential for food security. And I think this slide summarizes a lot of it. It shows, 3 large food, fuel, and fertilizer price crisis, and as you can see, they were very closely connected. And a food price crisis can be caused by climate change, and climate threats were always a factor in those price spikes. But food price crisis can also be caused by high energy prices, and they can also be caused by high water prices or water scarcity. So high water prices are not shown here, but I sometimes show a similar slide for California, where we have a water market, and we can actually show that those water prices have also fluctuated in part in line with high food and energy prices. So we have these crises, they're worsening, and right now, as you can see, we've had a very severe food price crisis, and this one has been combined with a very rapid or very large decline in GDP. So poor countries they basically face 2 things: a decline in GDP, which is the gray bar, and very high food inflation, which has caused a lot of tension and a lot of trouble, especially for ministries of food. And this slide just shows specifically for Pakistan and India the severe food inflation that both countries have faced. But if I talk about really severe, the left graph, food inflation is between 1% and 12%, but in Pakistan we talk about 10% to 46%. So this is extremely severe, and obviously governments are trying to respond to that with producing more food, increasing security of importing food into the countries. And of course, you cannot produce more food if you don't have the water resources in this region, and you also obviously need adequate energy resources, both fertilizer and for example, given the very high dependency of this region on groundwater pumping, now less so in Central Asia, but it's also growing, but particularly in South Asia. So it's really an energy and a water question. But the ministries of food and agriculture, continue to forget that this is really essentially a water and an energy question if you want to expand food production in these regions. Yeah, and this just a few more slides of why we are engaging in energy and water. Those are some food insecurity slides, but very much connected to water and energy. This shows the share of the population that cannot afford a healthy diet, and the reason of why 83% of the population in Pakistan and 72% of the population in South Asia cannot afford a healthy diet is because water-intensive agricultural commodities are too expensive. And they're water-intensive, so I'm talking about fruits, and about vegetables, and about animal-sourced foods. So they all require more water per unit of output. So if we don't do better on the water side, and if we don't connect nutrition with irrigation and with energy investments, we will not be able to get those numbers down. And you can see they're very sticky. You know, this is okay. This is only 4 years, but I don't expect anything of that to dramatically improve over the next 5 to 10 years. It might well worsen again. And in addition, whoops, yeah, sorry, it's too fast. So in addition to diets and nutrition, these are just some additional indicators on moderate and severe food insecurity, directly linked to the first graph, the first two graphs where I've showed the high food inflation. So both Pakistan and across South Asia, you've seen a severe increase in moderate and severe food insecurity, and very slow decline in stunting that is, impacted by a larger set of factors. And I've already mentioned, obviously, that climate change is a core contributor to this food price and energy price and water excess and security fluctuations. And we calculated using the impact model that the welfare losses from only long-term climate change, so not the floods of Pakistan and not the heat stress in South Asia, etc. Only long-term slow climate change with slowly changing temperatures and long-term changing precipitation patterns costs over just 30 years South Asia 1.1 trillion. So because there's always this question, is it worthwhile to invest in adaptation? Is it worthwhile to invest in mitigation? The short answer is yes, it does pay off. And the other slides just shows, given the high groundwater dependence, changes in recharge of groundwater in response to various climate change scenarios, and red means decline. So overall, with climate change, we try to rely more on groundwater resources, but in fact, the possibility to rely on groundwater is also shrinking. And the final slide, I've, over the last 10, 15 years, worked on expanding irrigation in Africa, because there's a lot of need, a lot of demand, high variability of weather and climate. But of course, traditionally, all the irrigation has taken place in Asia, and people think, oh, there's no way that anyone will put any more irrigation into this region. It has been maxed out. And this is a recent assessment, changes in irrigation between 2000 and 2015, unsurprisingly has shown that most of irrigation takes place in water-scarce areas, but India alone has still, quite dramatically expanded irrigation, and China has as well, and unsurprisingly, in some of the most water-stressed areas. So if people think, irrigation is an old story in this region, it's not, which is, again, as I said, not surprising with population change and water scarcity. So we actually, so that we have moved from Asia to Africa, we probably have to move back to Asia to work on irrigation, because the situation, looks a lot worse today. Just basic graph. Water scarcity is obviously increasing with population growth, and while it looks like very little movement in Pakistan, in fact, the water scarcity increase has been most rapid there. So it's like a decline by half. And we have some countries that still have water, but they have other problems. So they have flooding and destruction of infrastructure from glacier melt. And I didn't do much on energy, but just wanted to show one slide, because a lot of statistics are deceiving. For example, Pakistan, according to the World Bank, 91% of the population has access to electricity. Sounds great, so where's their problem? And then when you do a survey in Punjab, it's one district, Rahim Yar Khan, and this is just a question we ask households, do you have electricity for 20 hours or more? And you can see the shares are less than 10% to up to 40%. Those are the households who actually have access to electricity that's somewhat reliable. So you can have electricity you can have a grid, but it doesn't mean you have access to clean energy or to any energy. And so in response to all of those issues, the Nexus Gains initiative is working on 5 work streams. So we look at trade-offs and foresight analysis, and that work is led by Mohsin Hafiz, who will talk right after me. We're looking at water productivity and integrated storage interventions, so that I think Yasmin more or less has already introduced that topic. We're looking at doing better on energy, rural energy transition, and we also do a lot of work on governance and capacity, because as long as ministries don't work together, we know we cannot really solve those really multi-dimension challenges. And it's just to show with whom are we working in Nexus Gains. We work with 157 universities and research organizations. We work with 50 government partners, so that could be Ministry of Water, Ministry of Energy, etc. And on it goes. So I think we have a pretty broad network established, particularly in the South Asia region. And each of these initiatives, that you might have heard about a few others, each of them has a bunch of so-called innovations. And I don't have time to go over all of them, but if anyone is interested, we're happy to provide information. We have text written up about them and outputs. I'll just quickly, before handing over to Dr. Hafiz, will mention the Women's Empowerment and Energy Index and the Groundwater Governance Toolbox. So, we know that energy access is gendered, so our goal in Nexus Gains is to more radically and faster increase access to clean energy in rural areas, and specifically to women, which is a little bit challenging. And so we try to understand what are the factors, what are the benefits, of specifically focusing on women in rural areas. And if we do that, is that connected with other multiple impacts and outcomes? And so basically, we developed a standardized measure that helps us to assess how women are doing compared to men for both energy and productive systems and also in the household. And it also helps us to see if women that are empowered through energy access, if they have other beneficial outcomes in terms of nutrition, or could be many different things, leisure time, etc. And so we have implemented this in Nepal, India, and Pakistan. And here, those are some results from India, where we can, for example, see that unsurprisingly, men have higher adequacy in energy access, like 73% compared to women, where we only have 14%. And then we also have some households where women and men are doing equally well in terms of energy access, and that's a smaller share, 13%. So why does it matter? So we have not only developed the index, we've applied the index, we've also analyzed other important outcome indicators linked to this index. And what we found is that if women have more adequate access to energy, at least in India and Nepal, then they're more likely to participate in economic activities outside the home. In Nepal and Pakistan, more empowered women through energy are more likely to use cleaner energy sources. They are actually able to exert agency over energy technologies. And we also find in Pakistan, which is very important, higher or improved dietary diversity for women with higher agency over energy sources. So basically what we want to say here, you can use energy as an entry point for food security, nutrition, and for many other important outcome variables. And we need a standardized measure to show progress over time and to identify entry points for action. And before I hand over, I think this slide is really a slide that leads to Mohsin Hafiz's talk. Another area that we have worked on a lot is groundwater governance. We know groundwater resources are under extreme threat. Recharge is rapidly declining, not everywhere. In parts of India, it's actually increasing, but obviously not to a level of recovery because of very high extractions. And so we have been using a lot of participatory approaches, experiential games that have empowered communities, farm communities, to manage groundwater resources more actively. And we have been able to show more sustainable groundwater management as a result, with most of the impacts in India at this point in time, and we're still trying to expand this also into Pakistan, and we've done some pilots in Nepal. So with that, I hand over to my next presenter, Mohsin Hafiz, and he's a director of Water, Food and Ecosystems with the International Water Management Institute, a sister institute, and he's also the lead for the initiative in the Indus Basin. So please welcome Dr. Hafiz.
Thanks, Dr. Claudia, for making my life a bit easier. I mean, explaining that one, the rationale of the water, energy, food nexus, and setting up some of the dimensions for the South Asia. In my talk, I will be presenting about the two demand-driven innovations over the period of the Nexus Gain initiative. We explored around 12 innovations, and two of the innovations are the demand-driven. One is about the trade-off analysis, which was a particularly request coming from Ministry of Water Sources. What will happen if you reduce the 15% of sugarcane and 15% of rice to high water delta crop, and what will be the impact on water economy in Pakistan? And while achieving the food security, while achieving the nutrition security. Another one is coming from the Government of Punjab Irrigation Department, where they were asking about the groundwater management, how we could improve the groundwater management, especially supporting the Policy Level Water Act in implementation. Just the future of water in South Asia. Just on as Claudia mentioned, that the water scarcity is increasing, and then around 90% of water is used in agriculture in South Asia. And then as the water demand is increasing in South Asia, it will be around 23% more people in 2050. Industrial water demand is tripled by 2050. Irrigation water demand increases, but the water from the food sector will not be enough water available, and that poses a big challenge in that one. What will happen? And especially in South Asia, which is heavily using the groundwater, and around groundwater use in case of Pakistan, around 50% of water is coming met for the agriculture sector for groundwater. But groundwater is also using for the domestic and for industrial water supply. How we could balance the trade-off, especially looking around the energy dimension as well as on the water availability. So here the first study where we looked around that one Nexus Gain team led by the Steve. We're looking around the economy-wide impact of increasing water security, especially if you restrict the 15% of rice and sugarcane, and the cumulative effect on the water economy in Pakistan. We utilize the CG water model to assess that releasing water from high delta crop for other beneficial purpose while not making any impact on the nutrition and food security for the. First, we are looking around, this is here the snapshot of the annual crop water requirement millimeter per year. As you see on that one, we are saying that from the three high water delta crops, one is sugarcane, that varies from different methods from 1000 millimeter to around 1400 millimeter, but depends on the method which utilized for crop water consumption. Rice is around 740 to 1000, and then the third is the cotton, which is around 640 to 8 to 12. And here we will be particularly looking on the rice and sugarcane in the following slide. So we run the model. Model was CGW model was set up till 2014. So here in that one you're seeing the different crops, and then the 2014 is the one when the model was set up, and the model was showing the different crops in terms of their acreage. Irrigated rice is around 1.3 million acre in 2014. Basmati rice is around 2.63 million, and sugarcane is 1.58. Overall acreage is around 42.87 million acre if you talk about 2014. What will happen in 2030 scenario? Again, looking around that one here, we just looking around as a part of the traditional what will happen if there is nothing, and where we are estimating around 44.80 million acres of area will be irrigated, will be under the crops. Now, looking on the change is basically the net difference between 2014 and 2030. On the right hand side, we are looking around 15% reduction in rice. What will happen, and that we are seeing it around 300,000 hectare area will be reduced if we go with that scenario, and these are the simulation scenario which we done it. And again, When we are looking around 50% reduction in sugarcane, that's showing it around 230,000 acre area will be reduced if we go only for the sugarcane. And net cumulative, when we are looking around 15% of reduction in rice and sugarcane, that's giving us the area of around 400,000, around 200,000 from the sugarcane, and as well as around that around 500,000 from that coming it from the rice and then the basmati rice in particularly. And what will happen in case of the water use? Again, they're running the same scenario. For the water use, that's again showing it that in terms of I think here this typo, it's a million acre foot. Here we are talking about that one, the sugar cane and the base in terms of this is a for the irrigated rice is 3.63 million acre foot, and basmati rice 6.44, and when we go into the further in 2030, 4.23 and 6.67, and then similarly for sugarcane 7.04. When we are looking around 15% water use reduction in rice, and what's the impact? If area is reduced, how much will the impact on that one? This is around 3.2 million acre foot. Rice, the water use will be reduced only from rice, and from that the sugarcane it's around 3.18 million acre foot area water will be reduced. Overall, that's leading it to net depletion of the water, but how that water is appropriately reused for the other crops. Let's say the fruit crop area has been increased, vegetable crop area has been increased, so that there is no net impact on the food security and nutrition security for the scenario. And then we looked around further on that when the crop water use changes without the climate change, and here we are talking about the 2030 scenarios. Again, we are saying that one, this is the Punjab, Sindh, and then the other provinces cumulative for the Pakistan. And we are saying that one there will be an impact on that one, the rice, if that's rice area there, and then the sugar cane, but in terms of the cotton, there will be more water will be there, and in terms of it's more positive than for the rice area there will be rice and sugar cane, the area the water will be reduced, but in terms of cotton that will be increased. And when we are looking around with the climate change scenarios, and that's again showing it that again there is a more increase in terms of that on the for the cotton crop and for the across the provinces and everyone, and major is in Punjab province. Now looking around the cumulative one on that one, so we run on the national water use scenario with the alternative tax policies. If we go for the first combined sugarcane and rice, which is showing it on overall million acre foot, we are talking about 70.1 million acre foot. And if we added this sugarcane, rice, cotton, adding all the three crops on 30% of the taxing on the sugarcane, cotton and rice, that becomes around 68.9 million acre foot. And then if we just say it alternatively applying that one, the taxing on the crop, reduce the acreage. If you go tax on inputs such as fertilizer, that's leading to around 69.5 million acre foot. But if we are only looking around the combined that from the sugarcane and rice scenario, we are taking out the water around 3.2 million acre foot of water out of the agriculture, and if you convert how much water withdrawal, that's around 6.5 million acre foot. So that's showing that when there are possibilities, if you want to take out the water from agriculture, how we could do it and how we could pinpoint the areas. That's one innovation. Second is looking around the South Asia in terms of the groundwater use, which Claudia mentioned again, that when we are talking about the water is mainly groundwater used for agriculture, industry and domestic across the South Asia, showing the different countries. In India, around 25 million of groundwater pumps abstracting around 50 billion cubic meters of groundwater annually. That's around in Pakistan, around 1.5 million 1.5 million tubes are extracting around 50 billion cubic meter of water from the groundwater. Here, that's showing the snapshot of the tube wells, how the tube well has gone increases over a period of time. Only in case of Punjab, which we are talking about, there is around 1.1 million tube wells, unregulated tube wells are extracting the water without the quality and lowering the water table and also causing the soil degradation is one of the common phenomenon. And what we did it when we were talking with the government of Punjab, we saw, okay, the Punjab Irrigation Department is managing excellently the surface water information system, but they don't have a groundwater management information system. And now, in order to implementation of the Water Resources Commission, the Punjab Water Services Regulatory Authority, there is a must, we need to have that kind of information. So we helped to the Punjab Irrigation Department for 1.2 million geotagging of the tube wells, as well as we helped them on networking installing of the 125 divers for monitoring the near real-time monitoring of quantity and quality in 3 districts, and as well as the quantity and quality aspect of that one and capacity building of the stakeholders to the government of Punjab, how they could upscale to the whole Punjab. Here sharing some of the snapshot. Typically the irrigation department is installing that one, the piezometer well, they are monitoring twice a year, pre and post monsoon, and they are just installing it wherever there is easy to use. We did it principal component analysis based on the historical analysis of last 20 years, all the information, and then that's giving us the information. Here this is on the left hand side is showing that from the PCA analysis, wherever they were installing, it was not looking on the historical analysis, but now we provided a much more scientific based analysis to trying to identify the location where the water table is falling, and then as well as the water quality there, and that has been principal component analysis around installed the 40 CTE diver. This is a snapshot of Rahim Jharkhand district. Next was that we want to develop a groundwater management information system. So we developed a groundwater management information system where we have, this is showing a snapshot of the tube wells in Rahim Jharkhand district, showing that 81,000 tube wells are there, what's the average discharge, what's the water quality, what's the bore depth, and also how they are distributed, and the CTG diver is also showing it about the temperature, about the conductivity, about the water table, and how those varies within the over period of time. And now that is being upscaled to the 3 other districts, and we are working with the government of Punjab to upscale it. And here's some of the snapshot where we are working. We provide a series of training to the government, and now the government is doing their own investment to upscale into several other districts as part of Punjab. Another aspect is coming, that's the last point, is about the groundwater vulnerability. Another request coming from the government of Punjab, one farm water management, they want to identify where they should put the solar pumps irrigation system and looking around the groundwater vulnerability. So we did the groundwater vulnerability analysis for the whole Punjab and provided them which area they should promote the solar irrigation and where they should not be. Obviously that's showing the central part of Punjab is highly groundwater vulnerable zone where they should not be promoting the solar irrigation, and that is being applied for technical, business and financial model rollout under the World Bank CREATE project, how that could be applied and everything. This one, thank you very much. And this is here, the last one is about sharing some of that one. As there is a lot more that the tube wells are converting from the electrical and diesel to the solar, and so we also did some analysis on carbon credit. And this is showing the snapshot of what will the scenario if you reduce the 5% scenario of the diesel to the solar, the 10% scenario or 15% scenario, how much will be the carbon credit and how much will be the greenhouse gas reduction in those scenarios. Thank you very much.
We're now moving to the discussion component of our session. And I'd like to introduce our 2 discussants, and they can already come to the stage. And Yasmin maybe also already come to the stage. So yeah, we have Bimbika Basnet, who is a gender specialist with the Gender Equality Division, Climate Change and Sustainable Development Department of the ADB. And I expect her to talk a bit about some of the social inclusion aspects that are very important for any of this, heavy water, energy, and food assessment work. And our second discussant is Alisher Mirzabayev, who is also actually an expert on Uzbekistan. So even so, we're supposed to focus on South Asia. I can see some more deviation into the Central Asia region. And he's currently a senior scientist, policy analysis and climate change with the International Rice Research Institute, and he might also want to comment on the presentation by Mohsin on the proposed reduction of rice area in Pakistan, in trying as one intervention to reduce water scarcity in that country. So I look forward to an exciting discussion, but let me first really start with our panelist. in particular with Bimbika, to give us some impressions from what she has heard, and also some, I guess, suggestions for our work going forward. Yeah, so please, over to you. As you wish. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Bimbika. I'm very new to ADB. Actually, Claudia asked me to provide some examples from ADB's work. Unfortunately, I don't have them yet, but I wanted to reflect back on my own work. When I heard about integrated solutions, ensuring that, sort of climate strategies don't just focus on water or forestry or agriculture, that there are integrated initiatives. It took me back to my PhD days, back in early 2000s. And any given village in Nepal, which is where I did my field work, there used to be so many user groups. So irrigation user group, water user group, agriculture user group, forestry user group, and and also other user groups like mother user groups and youth user groups. And then, when I was very intrigued about these user groups, and inevitably most of them were formed by different sort of development or government programs. And when I looked at these user groups and wanted to understand who was actually a part of these user groups, it was very interesting that they were the same people. So it's great that now the programs are much more on sort of integrative solutions like climate smart agriculture, which focuses on integrated approach to managing landscapes, such as cropland or livestock or forests and fisheries. And that are really, addressing those higher level challenges that Director Yasmin, Claudia mentioned about the water, energy, and food nexus. And inevitably, these involves the use of technologies, conservation efforts, and all of these other sort of changes that are happening. And they're all, at the end, targeting farmers. Whether it is directly through projects or through an enabling environment through policy changes. So they're seeking to improve access to information and technology, incentivizing behavioral change, providing financing needed, connecting to markets, safeguarding against risks posed by both the slow and fast onset of climate change. And so from a gender perspective, the question really becomes like, who are these farmers? The farmers are not just owners, but also workers, and they can be both paid and unpaid. And when we look at farmers in that equation, when we broaden the definition of farmers, we see that women are also an equal part of the equation. And in South Asia in particular, with a lot of out-migration of men in rural areas, women do compose a large share of the productive age group in farming households. So, looking at this issue of water, energy, food nexus from a gender perspective is not only important for equity, but also for efficiency. So, Claudia mentioned the Energy Empowerment Index that is developed by IFPRI. Another index that I really like, which I had shared with Claudia earlier yesterday, was this Reach, Benefit, Empower, and Transform Index. And I think it's quite, intuitive what those mean. So REACH is about ensuring that both women and men have access to information, technology, incentives, support systems that are available. Benefit is ensuring that this access then leads to other outcomes, whether it's farm productivity, whether it's higher income, whether it's investment in human capital. And empowerment is possibly the more fuzzy one. What do we mean? So, it includes a lot of things, having more say in decision-making, greater mobility, control over use of input, to power with means like, voice and influence in groups, representation in groups, and also it also refers to the internal changes in individuals, such as changes in attitudes about domestic violence, increased self-efficacy, autonomy in income and production and entrepreneurial activities. So it involves developing a sense of self-worth and confidence in one's own abilities. So it's really interesting to see Claudia's results about how empowerment actually leads to benefits both for the women, but also for the entire household and for outcomes that we're interested in, from nutrition to energy adoption, renewable energy adoption. And then the final one, the indicator, as I mentioned, is reach, benefit, empower, and transform. So transform, in the end, project level gains will only be successful or even possible without broader transformation in norms and structures. So the transform is essentially about improving access to land, enhancing access to finance, reducing current barriers. So these are the sort of normative and structures that need to be transformed. So in conclusion, we've talked a lot about understanding and managing these complex interactions between water, energy, and food, which is really crucial for food security, particularly in a region like South Asia, where there's so many complex challenges from population growth and also economic development convergence. So adopting a gender lens through frameworks like these and applying them in both our project and policy approach really supports this transition and ensures that it's both efficient and also inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Very excellent comments, and strengthen the need to really take a disaggregated approach, because women and men's needs around water, energy, and food are quite different, and we have to be cognizant of where to intervene and how, and then to make sure that consider the trade-offs, because some of those interventions that we have seen increase the gender gap in resources, agency, and achievement. So I think it's great that ADB has a very strong focus on reducing these and eliminating gender gaps. So now we move over to our second discussant. Alisher, please, your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claudia. It's great to be here, and thank you very much to all the presenters for very informative presentations on ADBs and also CGIAR's Nexus initiatives, activities on water, energy, food, environment Nexus. If you remember, in 2011, when this concept of water, energy, food Nexus was first introduced or discussed in Bonn during the conference there, environment was not there. It was food, energy, water, energy, food. And then I think it's a very good development, very good addition that environment is also making an essential part of this Nexus concept. Another big change, I think, Claudia, which happened over the last decade since those times, is that at the beginning, this Nexus idea was a little bit fuzzy. People couldn't understand what does it mean. It's a little bit more like a narrative rather than specific action areas. And thanks to many activities, including with strong contributions from Claudia's team at IFPRI, this has now become a lot more concrete. We can see the numbers, we can see the results, we can see this more of a tangible type of approach to a water, energy, food, and environment Nexus. What is the Nexus? And Mohsin was saying about this, why do we need a Nexus approach? Number one reason, because these food, energy, environment, water sectors, they have overlaps, they have synergies and trade-offs. They cause something called externalities, so they affect each other. If we approach them each separately, we will be losing those interactions, we will be missing on them, and eventually maybe taking misleading actions on each of these, unless we are considering these interactions across these sectors. In that sense, I think there are three areas, three dimensions where these synergies and trade-offs are very important to look, and our presenters also in some way directly or indirectly highlighted those three areas. So one is, of course, obvious from the name, synergies and trade-offs across the sectors. Yeah? We need to capture those. For example, when there is soil erosion from agricultural lands and then it's blocking downstream the hydro energy production. So that's a trade-off for hydro energy generation. In the past, especially, and now as well from time to time, we hear about this trade-off between, in terms of biofuels, so food production for food, or crop production for food, or for biofuel production. But there are also, it's not only trade-offs, there are also synergies, for example, around agroforestry. In Ethiopia, a study led by Claudia and her team found that when farmers have trees near their plots, near their houses, their food productivity yields go up because they can spend more time on looking after crops instead of going around looking for firewood. Yeah? So this kind of very basic synergies and trade-offs across the sectors. I think I'm very glad, Mohsin, that now you are able to link it to CGE. Sometime back when we had a student from Ethiopia and working on the Nile Basin, it was a little bit difficult, but now I think this is a great idea to link it to economy-wide impacts. And I will come back to that in a moment when I will be talking about the people's dimensions. So this is synergies and trade-off across sectors, one. Second is across scales. And Yasmin was mentioning about this with a different level of studies at local level, how this affects. I think this is very important, especially these upstream, downstream locations. And one of the important aspects of looking across scales is also through trade. I think this is something that is not really captured in the model. So how, when we are talking about local scale to regional or global, yeah, we know there's hydroeconomic models which can look from watershed to basin and other things, but then how this is affecting a movement of goods, of course, food, yeah, trade, but also I think we need to also take into account that movements of people, migration. We know from that Karakalpakstan area that you were talking about, Yasmin, that how important, how negatively affecting this lack of water availability on peoples, and this is leading to big-scale migration from, in some cases. Third aspect was mentioned, this is synergies and trade-offs across social groups, so-called distributional effects. I think it's very important that we are highlighting the gender dimension, gender impacts, and it's essential part of the story, but this is that subset of the story. These social distributional effects are much bigger than only gender differences. Inequalities are bigger than only from the gender lens. So I think in addition to gender, we also need to look more into these distributional effects between poorer households and rich, poor and rich, between different type of social groups. So that would be, I think, an important element. And finally, I think overarching principle for all this, this concept from the beginning was driven from the water sector perspective at the start of it. Of course, now we have diverse perspectives. But still, I think there is a lot of this discussion about water productivity, energy efficiency. These are all absolutely important, but I think we also need to put people at the center. So what does it mean putting people at the center of the nexus? It means, from my perspective, it means looking a lot more into labor markets. How these nexus interactions are affecting incomes, wages. So in that CGE that we are doing, Mohsin, it would be great to see how this is affecting people's, not only this water product, but also yields and incomes. And I think that would be a great contribution going forward. In terms of, there are also a lot of, so this is analysis of the problem, but there are also many, many solutions that are made visible with this kind of nexus approach. And this is, I think, the important, very exciting part of the story. We talked about the rice situation in Pakistan, but you know, there are many technologies that help save water in rice production. So even without the need to reduce the acreage, you apply alternate wetting and drying. You save 30% of water, and then you produce more rice using less water. I think there are a lot of things a lot of that kind of nexus solutions that are available and which could be used. Thank you very much.
This is really excellent, and you can see that Alisher moved to the Erie. He moved to the Rice Research Institute. There's always solutions to keep this rice area going. We're in constant discussion from the water side, and we want to get rid of rice. And also from the nutrition side, if you've attended any of the rice sessions, right? There's a lot of understanding that eating all that rice is not that healthy. Anyway, okay, I didn't say that. We can delete that part from the session. But anyway, so I think this was really excellent, and I really loved all the contributions. So I've learned a lot, again, as usual. And Alicia gave the Nexus Gains initiative, but maybe also ADB, a very big work program, because as I mentioned, ADB has its own climate food nature nexus. So it's kind of a sister program. So I think a lot of food for thought, and I look forward to some responses from all of you. But at the same time, we'll also take questions from the room. I think we'll first start with maybe some quick reactions to the panelists from Yasmin and Mohsin. And then we'll move over to the room for Q&A, and we have some time for that as well. So Yasmin, maybe did you want to react to some of the comments and also some of the suggestions, both from Bimbika and from Alisher, and how you think you can incorporate those into ADB's work program? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia, and thank you to the Bimbika and Alisher. Also to Mohsin. And I think, Mohsin, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions on your presentation and that of Claudia. But just quickly, I think, Bimbika, your points that you've raised are very, even when you sat down, I was saying that this is essential that we keep women-centric approaches very core to our work that we're doing, particularly as we witnessed and see a lot more of the impacts around the climate context, like, for example, heat stress, and the implications of that for women. Also the fact that the impacts, as Claudia, you shared as well in your presentation in terms of access to energy, and I was thinking even at that moment that we often use a broad-brushed approach to considering that the stakeholder is of the same gender. And in many of the countries that we're working in, it's really women who are facing the key impacts of climate context and some of these access issues. So I do see that there are some strong areas that we could consider in our work, particularly around access to renewable energy, but also how that renewable energy ties up with some of those issues around, say, for example, heat stress and switching, even the type of fuels that are being used within the household to improve quality of life. So thank you for that. Would you like me to say on Alisher's as well for ADB? Yes?
Sure, yes.
I think the trade point, Alisher, I think that's where I was having my sort of ping moment of, wow, yes, haven't thought about that. But as you say, if we're looking at the virtual water context of production and how it's traded across from different countries, upstream and downstream, and also migration, maybe particularly around migration, and my climate colleagues in the audience may correct us, but I'm not sure if we're picking up the metrics around the climate migration. We all talk about it, but I'm not sure if we're actually, from ADB's side, really doing the understanding around there. And maybe that's something we could look at more closely when we're doing stakeholder engagement. I like the plug about IRI at the end, and the gains to be made from very simple techniques. My only concern around it is alternate wetting and drying is nothing new. It's been there for a long time, and yet the driving it through into actual substantial gains at the ground level, and it ties back into Mohsin. It's so the sort of the groundwater pumping, and I have our colleague here who's working on ABHY in India, Alexia in the back, and I'm sure she'll have questions. But trying to tie these two agendas up together is where I consider maybe a lot of the time government will come back to us and say, groundwater project, please. Insert those, put those tube wells in for us. Alternate wetting and drying, that's a farmer issue. So trying to tie that up, yes, a challenge for ADB, but definitely one that we need to work on. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And some quick reactions from Mohsin, and then we'll go to the room. Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to provide a quick comment. One is on the CGEW. We have done the yield and income modeling and all the farm at the different province level and how the farmers impacting and everything. But due to time, I didn't present it. The other brief comment on the AWD. Why yes, we could go for AWD, but as Yasmin mentioned, it was introduced in 2000. as I did it as part of my PhD, but it's still not yet applied across in many countries. It has a bit of the adoption, wider adoption in Southeast Asia, but when we talk in case of Pakistan, it has a very minimal adoption, and we are looking around some of the things where we don't have to invest and saying it what we could reduce on that one, having the change going through the whole extension program, the providing a farmer subsidy. Those are the things which are not beyond our control. The central government, the federal government is looking around what if we could, Pakistan is facing the water scarcity, how much water could be reduced, and then that was one of the option and scenario was that what if we reduce the rice and sugar cane, because that will be enough for country meeting the country food security need, and how will we balance on that one, and how much additional water is available that could be meeting to growing other crops for meeting the food and nutrition security. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So now the floor is yours, audience. Any questions you have on South Asia, Central Asia, please. And I hope you take the opportunity. Yes, please just go to the mic, I think, because that's the only mic we have. Yeah, please. And please introduce yourself.
Yes. I'm Kasturi Mukhopadhyay. I'm an independent consultant. Excellent presentation as always. But I missed the first few slides of Ms. Yasmin Siddiq because it's your fault. All these are so interesting. I was taking time to understand which one I have to attend. So I don't know whether you have dealt on this before. That's my apology for that. But I'm just wondering whether ADB is also looking into the traditional water system and water harvesting projects. Some of these were very interesting projects. I don't know about other countries. In India, we had, traditional water system, which was some of the names I would like to say is like the bamboo pipes of the Apatani types, which they use for diverting water just using the gravity because it's a hilly area. Then we had the Kund, small tanks, Kadin, channelizing the runoff surface water into the agricultural field. Then Talabs, Jahad, rainwater storage tanks. Then Bauli, the reservoirs of the Thar Desert and Gujarat, which are very, very water scarce. Bauli also is there. Then Ahar Pani was also harvesting the flat water, storing it in Bihar, which is also have a lot of this problem, water scarcity. Now, there are also some very interesting projects which are also available in YouTube readily, like very popular Pani Foundation by Amir Khan, where the local communities were involved to, harvest water. And he said that the villages which will do it best and in the shortest time would get some awards. So the whole community was, involved in it, and they were participating. And it really brought about great changes in that ecology of that area. So is ADB looking into these kind of projects? Many of these water harvesting systems were also lost. It's not used. And the revival of it can bring a lot of benefit in terms of afforestation, reduced soil erosion, rainwater catchment area increase, groundwater harvesting, and then it could empower women because it will bring down the women's gap and lead to employment generation. They are mainly very, very energy efficient. Yeah. And the revival of traditional knowledge.
This is great, but we have a few more questions.
Yes,
so
yes.
Your
and cost effective. Yeah. So are we looking into this kind
Good.
of
That is the question. That is fully understood. Thanks so much. We have, I think, Alexis, if that's the correct name, and then the gentleman from here and gentleman from there. And then we go back to answers because my memory is not that good anymore. Okay, please.
Hi. I'm Alexia Michels. I work in the AFNR sector, and I happen to be an hydrogeologist, so I was very happy today to hear a lot about groundwater. And actually, my question is related to what you just said, because you mentioned the Atal Bhujal Yojana program, and I was curious about some community-led sustainable groundwater management, so if you can give some example of that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great. And then, this gentleman on the right, gentleman on the left, And also, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Krishna Joshi from Nepal. I'm working with ADB as a consultant. So I have a couple of feedback to this Nexus gains. I was working with IRI before joining ADB, and I recently visited Pakistan. So I have a couple of very, very positive feedback to refine your model. The first thing what I learned in the ground, rice area is not decreasing. Rice area is, increasing in Pakistan. In fact, it is going to cotton belt, replacing cotton. And I was amazed. In Nepal, we say rice does not have any margin at all. The first thing I heard in Pakistan, they are saying rice is, it's profitable crop and it's export commodity. So government of Punjab and probably Sindh and KP will be interested to, produce more rice to export. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
So that's, related to people. I don't think we can have legal restrictions, what they can grow and what they cannot. Therefore, that's one dimension which should be, factored in. The issue of AWD, yes, we know AWD has been there from the beginning of the millennium. Why it is not adopted? There are a couple of very, very strong, elements. Number one, all over South Asia, rice, the major rice crop is grown during the monsoon, when you cannot have control over when it is dried and when you can irrigate the crop. So that's one thing. The second measure, even more important than that, is government is giving water free of cost. There is no charge on water. The third, equally important, is there is no economic incentive for farmers to use AWD. So in our project in Pakistan, what we are doing now, trying to create economic incentive for AWD, so that will be through carbon market. So we have a systematic, experiment in 2 sites in Okra and Kalasah Kaku, RRI. So that will generate data, and this will be, I think, an eye-opener for policymakers as well as for the farmers. So the other thing,
last one because we have more.
Yeah. The other thing which can save water, and help Pakistani government is use short duration, drought tolerant varieties, right? That's so simple. And IRI is here. IRI is missing in the Nexus gain. I'm sorry, IRI must have been from the beginning, and this is missing. And DSR.
Yeah.
Don't forget DSR. That saves nearly 35% water. Thank you very much.
Okay, so IRI is a member of Nexus Gains and working on direct seeded rice in Haryana, but we have yet to see direct seeded rice in action. Yeah, but they're not there. Anyway, good. Next.
Hi. So I'm from the Climate Change Environmental Sustainability for Local Government in Quezon City. Our main thing is understanding how Nexus actually moves on in terms of policy, 1, and 2, fiscal model. Like, which agency is most effective in implementing such convergence of activities? There has to be one. And then 2, where does the funding go? Which agency? How effective would be one to actually do it versus to other of the people? So it's really a process more than the impact, because we're sure we want to do the impact to all of the user groups, but who would be the most ideal to do the Nexus initiative and actually do the policy incentives? Thank you.
It's always good to hear a pragmatic question. Where does the money go? Very good. Yeah, I guess, so I guess, okay, you have heard a lot of questions. Some are direct to you and some are more generic. I might just say something about the money, because I'm an economist. So it depends, right? And there are, sometimes commissions across government agencies that focus on climate change or even on water. They generally they can include various ministries and actors. So Ministry of Finance is obviously the best, or National Planning Commission, right? The best agency to ensure or to integrate or enforce a Nexus approach. And as you said, it's a very it's a long-term process. Even if it's written in policy documents, for example, we supported the government of Nepal to integrate Nexus and Nexus approach in their irrigation policy reform, and we've had capacity building events with them and many things. That doesn't mean, it's now on paper, that doesn't mean tomorrow everyone will operate differently. So yeah, it's a long-term process. Obviously, ministries of finance are always our preferred partners, but in reality, we continue to do most of our work with ministries of water and agriculture, and even getting them at the same table and thinking alike is, as you all know, remains a big challenge. So, but now I'm handing over, who would like to start to answer some of those questions, and I'll address the India groundwater governance question later. Do you want to start? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to start perhaps with the last question about what is the organizational way for implementing Nexus. I personally think we can discuss that coming up with some kind of superstructure, super ministry which will unite food, environment, or I think it will. It's not necessarily the way forward, probably, because there will be still there will be this kind of silos which need to be overcome. I think a much better approach to make sure that there is a lot better coordination when laws are being enacted or regulations are being made, so that these kind of nexus synergies and trade-offs are taken into account and then implemented through these legal systems which affect all the different ministries.
Okay.
We talked about AWD. Of course, there are old technologies, but these are also timeless technologies. So that means their relevance is still there. And one of the important barriers for their adoption is water policy, actually. A big part of the AWD's advantage is in water savings. If water is not priced, is free, and then there is no actual benefit from applying AWD, especially during the normal years, then of course the chances are lower. But what we also see in Bangladesh, for example, when they start doing volumetric pricing, application of AWD goes up very, very fast. And on top of that, nowadays, an additional advantage of AWD is through methane, reducing methane emissions in addition to reducing water. So I think this is something that is not yet explored, that part, methane emissions. There's a lot of talk, and it was mentioned. But this is, I think, something that is going to happen, that's going to be coming on the surface of discussions a lot more, and it hopefully also will be going a lot into the implementation area soon. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yasmin?
Seems to be the favorite question from our last question around the policy aspects. And Alisher and I were just quickly saying to each other that at the end of the day, so much of this is linked to that macro distortion that takes place anyway when, one, there's no pricing mechanism on water, but often with our rice systems, it's very difficult to measure as well on open canal systems. Number two, when you have minimum support prices for rice, which incentivize farmers to continue to grow rice in the traditional ways they've done it. And thirdly, when you have massive subsidies on energy for agriculture with no separation of feeders for household domestic use of agriculture, and if you have flat tariffs for agriculture, energy for agriculture, this is also a huge disincentive. I'd just like to hear make 3 points. Number one, ADB did undertake a policy-based lending. So Ministry of Finance, to answer your question, is the ministry that we often would work with when we want to bring in policy instruments with the government to really guide or shape the direction the government is keen to head in, particularly now with NDC and NAP. And in Punjab, I think it was around 2011, ADB had the Development Sector Finance Program, policy-based lending, in which it was all looking at water resources, but from an energy perspective. Claudia, you and I worked after that on looking more at the ground level on energy use. But in that, there was the mechanism to firstly separate the feeders and then do metering at the farm level to understand how much power was being used, and then based on that, come up with some graduated approaches on power tariffs for use of tube wells in rice cultivation in Punjab. Number two, we now are using much more of the instrument I mentioned in my presentation, which is sector development program, where you have a policy lending to the government, but linked to specific areas which are related to the sector that you're working on, and bringing in reforms through that, but also having an investment component which will incentivize the relevant ministry. So you're tying up the Ministry of Finance with the line ministry for the sector, for example, agriculture or water resources, so they see a direct benefit from that macro intervention on the policy which is linked to the sectoral area. So that could be on cost recovery and setting a specific water charge. Thank you.
Thank you. Bimbika, did you want to address some of those comments?
I think those are all very important comments. I can mention from a couple of, previously I was in Indonesia, and a couple of sort of national level sort of initiatives that worked. Was a good example is probably the social protection initiative. So in Indonesia, a similar issue as we find in the agriculture, natural resource management sectors, lots of different ministries, and nobody's sort of driving the agenda. And, but then there was a high-level recognition that social protection was very important for addressing poverty and deprivation. And hence there was a unit that was formed within the Vice Minister's office that brought in different sectors, but also a layer of independence, and worked directly with local governments to sort of implement changes. Of course, it created tensions, but also created a sense of harmony and purpose. And now you see that the measures are still being continued despite successive changes. So perhaps there's a lesson in that, looking across different sectors. Thanks.
Okay, great. And Mohsen, you have a lot of questions, I guess.
Yep. I just want to comment briefly about that one, the rice area increase in Pakistan first. I think that one of the fundamental things we are looking around the agroecological zone, we are talking about the water availability in Pakistan. The water price before last year in October, it was around less than $1 per acre for the whole year without any cropping zone. Now the government has introduced a different cropping prices on that one per acre. Rice area is around 2,000, sugarcane is around also higher level per acre. And what the next thing is that one, whether that's kind of the artificial what we are talking about, that we have the input is price is more on a production, and then we are subsidizing through the tube-wells, or whether we are going it on the other prices on that one, not taking the right the price of the surplus water. How that's impact on that one, under the Nexus again, we are doing one study where we are looking at one of the pilot district and saying it, what's the impact of that one if we introduce a different prices based on the government, how that will be having impact, and what's the total margin on that one. Because we are talking about virtual water trading when we are saying Pakistan is producing a rice more and everything. At the central level, at the federal government level, there is a lot more realization that we need to control the water, we need to have the water more productive use, but the biggest problem is coming that the surface water you could control, but the groundwater is unregulated, and unregulated groundwater mean that anybody could install any tube wells and any number of tube wells and pump as much as. Just to give one example, for the district Rahimjar Khan, which is a pilot study area for Nexus gain, there was a hypothesis that there is around 40,000 tube wells that exist only in one district, 40,000. And overall at Pakistan level, 1.2 million tube wells exist for the one. And the whole Pakistan level, there are 2,000 solar pumps exist in Pakistan. But in district Rahimjar Khan, we have counted now 81,000 tube wells so far, and still the government is saying it. Those are the geotagged, which we have actual number. We know the sources of water. Out of that one, 6,000 tube wells are only solar. We are talking about 2,000 tube wells for whole Pakistan, but the actual evidence-based numbers are showing it only 6,000 in one district. And still the government is saying there is around 25,000 tube wells, 20% of the area is missing. The next thing is, once this information will be available, we are trying to embed it into the groundwater information system. So the government of Punjab, the irrigation department, they will be able to implement the groundwater policy and then saying it, how much is the sustainability, how we could manage the groundwater sustainability. It's a long process, but we are working on that step, and the government is taking those measures, how that could be implicated, and that's where we are supporting the policy level implementation. And that's feeding to the various things. If that the groundwater is sustainably managed, then that will be also impacting on this energy, also on the food production and everything. With this one, I will stop.
Okay, thank you. There was the one question on traditional water systems and ADB, to what extent you are considering those as part of your investments. Maybe you can just quickly comment on that.
Maybe just to answer that question, of course, for ADB, just for those who may not be familiar, we're usually entry point is with the relevant government ministry or Ministry of Finance at the center level in the case of India, and then the state levels. So that would be our direct partner that we work through. We now do have projects, for example, in Meghalaya, and again, Alexia has been working on that one, where we're looking at the development of ponds and watershed management with local communities to try to better manage water resources. In terms of the very specific areas that you mentioned in different states, for us that would be very important that that request to support those initiatives is really led by the government, because we would not be entering directly into an engagement with the community on a project. We would work through the government based on what the government's development strategy is in the state. But of course, those communities would be beneficiaries and could play a role as key stakeholders in which we could revive their traditional systems based on the area we're working in.
Okay, great. And just a question on groundwater governance. So it's quite long history. So about 10 years ago, so my colleague Bruce Meinzendick started a pilot with Foundation for Ecological Security in India to promote experiential games to show communities how different actions that they might undertake affect their own groundwater systems. So those are hard rock aquifers, so they can actually control the aquifers themselves through active management. And they had control communities where there was just some engagement but no experiential gains. And then they did an impact assessment, and they found that those communities were the partner FES had been working with communities to just show them how different actions, different extractions, different cropping patterns affect the level of groundwater. And those communities significantly changed practices. They instituted some rules, etc. And so that program has then expanded with some bilateral support from the German government to about 240,000 communities, and it has since been adopted by the national program as one of their training activities, and also by the extension system, the manage program. So basically they have trained a lot of other partners, and this is a self-sustaining and growing program. And it also forms part of the groundwater governance toolbox that Nexus Gains has been promoting elsewhere. And we've also done some pilots in Africa, and under Nexus Gains a pilot in Nepal. And we have a very strong demand and request to do that in Pakistan as well. And you might have heard that Pakistan, we see 8 to 10% of tube wells are solarized. So it's very difficult to actively manage those groundwater wells. And so what we really need is community engagement to more actively support or increase sustainability of water resources. So this is a very traumatic difference in Pakistan compared to India, where the government has been trying to solarize tube wells, but there's too many other subsidies, so farmers are not interested. In Pakistan, you don't have good electricity and good energy, and so solarization is happening without, actually against government wishes, right? So because there's vulnerable zones, and the government doesn't necessarily want solar to come in, but it's coming in exactly in those most vulnerable zones. So there's a lot of work to be done. And with that, we close this session. I would like to really thank you for your very active participation in the session. And please, a hand to both of all our presenters and our panelists. Thanks so much. Thank you.